will save you. He will save you. Just now. Just now. He will save you. Jesus will save you. Just now. Let's stand for our proper creed. I believe in God, Father Almighty, the maker of heaven and earth, and Jesus Christ, the only Son, our Lord, who was conceived by the Holy Spirit, born of the Virgin Mary, suffered under Pontius Pilate, was crucified and dead and buried. The third day he arose from the dead. He ascended into heaven, he sits on the right hand of God, the Father Almighty. From thence he comes to judge the quick and the dead. I believe in the Holy Spirit, the Church Universal, the communion of saints, the forgiveness of sins, the resurrection of the body, and life everlasting. Father heaven, we come this morning with our heads and on our heart. Thanking you, O God, for the many blessings that thou hast bestowed upon us. We ask in heaven, Father, that teach us path right. Yes. Bless us, Father, in a way that we stand in the need of. Because, Father, we know we can't do nothing without your aid and assistance. Yes. Just have mercy upon us. Therefore, I pray for the sick this morning. One in hospital, one to come and listen home. Touch their heart and body, they may feel better. Then, Father, that's especially bless the one that pushed their way out this morning, and the one that on their way, Father. Let's touch them in a special way, Father. Then, Father, look down in the war zone today, Father. We might not understand the reason of what's going on, but, Father, you know, Father. We're asking you, Father, to just direct them to bring peace, Father, in the name of Jesus. Then, Father, look down on the one that seemed unconcerned today, Father. Turn them around, Father, for whatever left. Too late. Let them know, Father, you God beside you there no other. Yes. And just have mercy upon us. And then, Father, we come to study your word today, Father. I pray that we may understand the word, Father, but we might be able to apply it to our daily life. Yes. And just have mercy upon us. These are the blessings of our Son, Jesus' name. Jesus. Amen. Our servant prayer. Our Father, which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we give us trespasses against us. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory forever. Amen. You may be seated. Today's lesson is the first lesson in this 22. Babylonian captivity in lesson scripture is 1, 2, 6 to 4 through 7. Focus scripture 1, 1 through 8, 11, 2, 4 through 7. The key verse. As soon as they came to the house of the Lord in Jerusalem, some head of the family made to erect it on its side. This is 268 in the Revised Standard Version. Number 1. In the first year of King Cyrus of Persia, in order that the word of the Lord found for the of Jeremiah might be accomplished, the Lord spared King Cyrus of Persia, so that he sent a herald throughout all his kingdom. And also in a written edit declared.
True. Thus said King Cyrus of Persia, the Lord God of heaven has given me all the kingdom of the earth, and he has charged me to build him a house at Jerusalem and Judah.
3. Any of those among you who are of his people, may their God be with them, are now permitted to go up to Jerusalem today and rebuild the house of the Lord, the God of Israel. He is the God who is in Jerusalem.
4. And let us all survivors in whatever place they reside be assisted by the people of their place with silver and gold, with goods and animals, besides free will offerings for the house of God in Jerusalem.
5. the head of the family of Judah and Benjamin, and the priests and the Levites, everyone whom Spirit God had stirred, got ready to go up and rebuild the house of the Lord in Jerusalem.
6. All their neighbors resided them in silver vessels, with gold, with goods, with animals, and with valuable gifts, besides all that was freely offered.
7. King Cyrus himself brought out the vessels of the house of the Lord that Nebuchadnezzar had carried away from Jerusalem and placed in the house of his God.
8. King Cyrus of Persia had them released and took charge of Melchizedek, the treasurer, who counted them out to Shebazar, the prince of Judah.
11. The total of the gold and silver vessels were 5,400. All these Shebazar brought up when the exiles were brought up from Babylon to Jerusalem.
64.
The whole assembly together was
42,360.
65. Besides their male and female servants, of whom there were 7,337, and they had 200 male and female saints.
66. They had 736 horses, 245 mules.
67. 435 camels, and 6,720 donkeys.
68. As soon as they came to the house of the Lord in Jerusalem, some of the heads of the families made freewill offerings for the house of God to erect it on site.
69. According to their resources, they gave to the building fund 61,000 darics of gold, 5,000 minas of silver, and 100 priestly robes. 70 together, the priests,
the Levites, and some of the people lived in Jerusalem, and their descendants, and the singers, the gatekeepers, and the temple servants lived in their town, and all Israel in their town.
Thank the Lord for bread. And God, all these words saying, I am the Lord thy God who brought thee out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. Thou shalt have no other God before me.
Lord, have mercy upon us, and incline our hearts to keep this law.
Hear what Christ our Savior said. That's the Lord thy God with all thy heart, with all thy soul, with all thy mind. This is the first and great commandment, and the second like unto it. That's the Lord thy neighbor thyself. On these two commandments hang all the law and the prophets.
Glory to the Father, and to thy Son, and to thy Holy Ghost, as it was in the beginning, it is now, and ever shall be, world without end. Amen.
Thank you, Brother Jay. And we thank each and every one of you for joining in with us on the conference line or here in the sanctuary streaming channel. We thank one of you. Where you have had a good last week, and hopefully we'll get a jump start to ushering in a good week this week.
Amen.
It is our prayers. Right now, before we get into the lesson, our prayers are with Bay County that are dealing with, the forest fire. Over 1,400 acres has perished in the fire. Sister, your sister is in.
Yes, but she's on the other side right now.
Okay, that was the first. That was the first person I thought about. And I thought about Sister Laura because she has to drive to Panama for work. So let's keep them in our prayers. And as we see the fires that we used to see over in California and all of that, they're getting closer and closer. Matter of fact, I was looking at on Facebook the Jackson County Times, and they showed a picture of the fire department over in Sneeze. That fire had started, but thank God that it was contained. So I know Jackson County has a burn ban right now, but just to show, it only takes a spark. And I just wonder, why can't we do that spiritually? Because all it does is take a spark to ignite a fire. So we're praying today that the Lord will send a spark our way in church. We can have a little bit of time. But when we look at our lesson today, great lesson, the Babylonian captivity, our introduction says, pretty good introduction. The book of Ezra is written by the prophet of the same name. He provides an account of the exiled Jews' return to their homeland. Decree of King Cyrus of Persia. Other prophets also present and present an account of this historic incantation of the Jewish people. Prophets as Jeremiah predicted not only the fall of the nation of Israel at the hands of the tyrant dictators, but also their return 70 years later. Ezra writes about the fulfillment of the prophecies, but through the eyes of the returned refugees. Being a priest himself, he ensures that future generations recognize that the Jews' return is not simply an act of human compassion to suffering or a need to promote justice and fairness to these oppressed people. This is not a simple act of man or a historic event occurring by chance. Instead, Ezra considers the prophetic word of Isaiah and Jeremiah and affirms the divine manifestation of God's plan. Ezra documents the importance of returning to Yahweh, the one true God, and restoring the purity of the priesthood. He illustrates the responsibility of God's people to invest in rebuilding the temple and restoring the holy practices that God originally ordained. My full introduction. Anything anybody drew out of the introduction or just a lesson together. Then I'll touch on some stuff that I saw in the introduction. Anyone? A couple things that I saw in this introduction. I have a bunch of things I saw, but I can't cover them all. So a couple things that I saw is when we look at this part, where it talks about Jeremiah predicted not only the fall of the nation of Israel at the hands of the dictators, but also their return 70 years later. Isaiah also talked about and prophesied about the captivity and the return. It's amazing how the Lord tells us or shows us what's going to be our punishment if we continue to do what we know we should be doing. But also, he gives us encouragement that he will let us know that punishment ain't going to last forever. All right? God is not a God that's going to hold a grudge forever. He's not us. Us folk can hold grudges forever in a day. Right? But he's showing that even through him, he's already devised a plan to get us out of the storm. Now, the problem that we run into is this right here. How long are we going to stay in the storm? How long are we going to stay in the storm? It's just like, you know it's raining, right? You know it's raining, but we're so hard-headed sometimes, we don't want to get out of the rain. Right? And nobody help us do what we're doing or get us an umbrella because we got it. I ain't worried about no rain. And I stay there. So sometimes we're hard-headed that we're going through something, and all we got to do is repent. All we got to do is ask for forgiveness. All we got to do is confess. All we got to do is just stop. But we're so hard-headed that we keep going. And the other thing that I looked at in here, that Ezra, it wasn't by chance that this happened. It wasn't because King Cyrus of Persia took over and he was so good that he said, I'm ending this captivity. Right? When we look at Abraham Lincoln, I know we credit Abraham Lincoln for the Emancipation Proclamation, but it was through God that this happened. Right? Yes, he used Abraham Lincoln. He had a divine intervention, but it's the same thing with King Cyrus. It wasn't by because he was so good that this happened. And it's just like with us. Sometimes we want to take credit for some of the stuff we do in people's lives. But do we realize it's because God's divine intervention in us that we were able to intercede for somebody else? Because think about it, sometimes when we help people out, and we look back over what we did, I'm just going to say it this way, when it comes to financial help, right? Sometimes we help people financially, and then when we sit there and look back at how much we helped them, you be like, wow, how did I even have that type of money to help? Right? It was because God knew that was coming. So he interceded through divine intervention for you so you can intercede somebody else's behalf. But see, a lot of the times when we look at it, we think we can't help folk because it's stuff that we want to do, not stuff we need to do. And I tell anybody, we always need to take care of our needs first. After we take care of our needs, and if there's nobody else in need, then we can get to our wants. But watch this. If I've taken care of my needs, Sister McKay has a need, and I still have an ability to help Sister McKay with her needs, then sooner or later, the Lord is going to say, well, you have made sacrifices, so now the wants that you had, we're going to give you the desires of your heart. Because I start to realize that the more I help, the more it comes back. So it wasn't because this man was so good and Nebuchadnezzar was so bad. It was because God's intervention in all of this. Another thing that I wanted to put out is this. He illustrates the responsibility of God's people to invest in rebuilding the temple and restoring the holy practices that God originally ordained. It is up to us to invest in God's temple. It is up to us to put an investment in God's church, right? Into the church, God's building. And that's why I'm always looking, that's why I'm always asking everyone to let me know what you want to see. Not out of my church, but out of your church. Amen. When you ride by, what is it that you want to see, right? Because if you're able to picture it, right, and you're able to see the vision of it, you already invested in it because now you want to see your idea come to fruition. And if you really want to see your idea come to fruition and you start to do more stuff, then it really is going to come. Mm-hmm. So we got to realize that all of us play an important part in the building and upkeeping of God's temple. Right? We play an important part in it because we want to make sure it might not be the biggest, It might not be the best, but it's ours. And the Lord has blessed us with it. Because think about it, if we go back to when our forefathers first built McChapel, when the first one burnt down, they could have said, you know what? I did it. The Lord told me to build it. It burnt down, so guess what? I ain't messing with it no more. Right? But they continue. They continue. Now it's up to us to take what they built and pass it on to our kids and all that, so they'll have a place to worship.
Amen.
So they can come back years later and say, this is where I grew up at. Right? This is where I grew up at. So it's always good to invest into God's kingdom. But watch this. I want to throw something else out there because our bodies is a temple.
Amen.
Right? It is good to invest in our own selves. It is good, and I know I make, I preach and joke about, men, toupees and, but the eyelashes, the wigs and lace fronts and all of that. But it's good to invest in yourself.
Amen.
But the problem is, we're so busy investing in ourselves, but we're investing, the way we're investing is physical outer appearance. And our inner appearance is fading away. Right? So the investment I'm talking about, we got to invest in ourselves spiritually, but also we got to invest in ourselves with the proper eating. We got to invest in ourselves in the proper exercise. We got to invest in ourselves, and Lord knows this is what I need to do. Invest in ourselves in the proper amount of sleep. Y'all too don't say nothing about that, but I know what both of them, they're both sitting right beside each other, we're going to say, I got to invest in myself with the proper sleep. All right? We have to. Because how can God use us if we're broken down? Right? How can God use us if we're broken down? Right? How can you mow your yard if your lawnmower ain't got but 2 wheels and it's supposed to have 4? Right? How can you? Right? How can you get from point A to B if you ain't changed the oil in your car and now the engine blown? There's some investment you have to do. Right? So it's just like us. How can God use us if we're not investing in ourselves? So it said here, and that it illustrates the responsibility of God's people to invest in rebuilding the temple. There's people, and we joke about it. The building fund. I remember Steve Harvey said he had a building fund since he was little, and the church ain't put a doorknob on the church on the door since he had the building fund. Well, the reason why they ain't did it because people are still fussing over what to do. You can't move forward if everybody arguing. Right? So we have to invest, and we have to sometimes come together and have a plan. So they had to invest. Anything before we go into telling the Bible story? Will someone read? Actually, let me do it this way. I'm going to break it down in sections. The first chapter of Ezra opens with a decree being proclaimed by a new emperor. The year is about 638 BCE, around the beginning of King Cyrus of Persia's reign over Babylon. As a critical shift in the government's rule over their captivities, King Cyrus investigates the cultural background of his subjects and studies the historical record. His findings reveal the harsh, cruel reign of King Nebuchadnezzar, the forced outer worship, and the discretion of the holy temple and objects. King Cyrus respects the religious beliefs of the Jews and indication that God has touched his heart and revealed God's divine purpose for the children of Israel. Let me stop right there for a second. Anything from anybody? And you can talk about the whole reading the Bible story. If you want, I just wanted to stop right there for a second. Anything from anybody?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
I'm from McChapel AME Lewis. Father told me one time that we invest in too much of trying to change people. But what we need to do is watch the words we use. The words have the power. The words go out and can't come back. We can sometimes we don't. So in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God, and God was with the Word. We are the Word of God. When He speaks, His Word go out and do things, and it don't need flesh. We need flesh to get around. So it came about a sacrifice. So we have to sacrifice this idol we got, this flesh, called our phones up, and trust in the breath of life God gave us when He molded us and blew breath into it. That was the first temple. We can defile the temple that He made for us to stay in. Because we just stand in this body, but when we go forth, we think what comes out of our heart. We can equalize it with love and realize it. We're not here to judge. We're here to receive help as we breathe, when we eat. Certain things we have to do in order to live.
Right.
You're right about that. But the first thing we gotta love and give someone a chance to come forward and let them realize it ain't us, but it's the Word of God, and it lives. I just want to thank you and praise you for being here.
And thank you for that, and not trying to get into what I'm going to preach on this morning, but we got to have a self-examination, right? And we are so quick to speak without thinking of the ramifications of what we're going to speak. Because sometimes we just need to get it out there, because I don't want nobody to think I'm weak. I don't want nobody to think I'm soft, right? So I need to put them in a place quickly. But we got to realize, while we're trying to put them in their place, God is putting us in our place, right? So we have to take a step back and think about the words that we say, right? Because it's not what goes in to the mouth that defiles it, but what comes out. The tongue is a harsh weapon. The tongue can cause more damage than our hands can. Because the tongue will cut physically, it will cut mentally, and it will cut spiritually. So thank you for reminding us that, yes, we got to be careful of what we say. But watch this. We got to be careful not only what we say, but how we say it. I used to say in the military, we had when I first got in, one of our drill sergeants, he would get on us, but he'd get on us so politely. Right? And I'm like, you know what? I'd rather him just yell and fuss at me and get on me than having a polite butt chewing. I don't know whether to thank him or be mad at him. Right? So we got, there's a way that we can say stuff to where it don't come off as harsh, and people will receive it more. So yes, and watch this. Tying that back into this, all right? We have had, let me show you how history repeats itself. During that time, King Nebuchadnezzar was so bad that he put the state or put the country in exile, right? But it was because of their own doing. Don't think that Nebuchadnezzar just came and said, I'm going to do it. It was because the people's doing, right? About a couple of years ago, didn't we have somebody that we didn't even want to call by name? We just called him by a number, right? We just kept saying 45. We didn't even call him Donald Trump, President Trump, because they ain't my president. My president's still black. So, but the problem is, the reason why Trump really came is because we still weren't doing what we're supposed to do, right? Trump was never the cancer, right? He was a symptom of the cancer that was already there, right? And the thing was, because we didn't realize it was a cancer, we allowed it to spread, right? So when we look at it, our Nebuchadnezzar was Donald Trump, right? And really, we could go back, our Nebuchadnezzar was George Bush. Our Nebuchadnezzar was some of the other presidents, right? But as we see now, we have a shift in leadership. We have a shift in power. But I got a question for you, and I want to bring this up because I see us going down the same road again. I see us going down the same road. We were so happy when Barack Obama won that we stopped looking at the political side of it and just was looking at him. And he was black. But then we started to realize, because we allowed society to come into play, and even though he's black, he's still not black enough. Because he didn't come and help me. He didn't alleviate my taxes. He didn't give me no cuts. He didn't remove all my debt. So he ain't black enough. And we stopped. I ain't gonna say we stopped, but we had an instance to where we then prayed that the Lord would guide him in the way that the Lord needed to guide him on the political realm. It's one rule, it's one law that he signed that has broken up churches, that have split churches, and that was the same-sex marriage. George Bush didn't sign that. Donald Trump didn't sign that. It was the one that looked like us signed that. If Donald Trump would have signed that, we would have been marching, would have been having a fit, we would have been protesting. But because it was one of us, we looked over it. And that's one of our problems. We always look over stuff, right? And we're back in that same thing. We're looking over some of the stuff that this president is doing. We're looking over the fact that I hadn't even heard 1,000 words from our vice president since she's been in office. Right? So we got to realize we still are in need of much prayer. We have a shift in power, but we're still going around in circles. As I can't remember who it is, I think it was Will Little, that what the song said, "You got me going in circles." This country has us going in circles. We're in that revolving door, and we're having fun. Have you ever been to a mall somewhere and they got the revolving door, and you just got to go through that revolving door, right? And just keep going round and round. So even though we see in history repeat itself, the scary part about it is history is repeating itself. And some of us, watch this, we'll allow our own personal history to repeat itself, right? And it's just easy this because it is tax season, right? It is crazy to me how people post on Facebook, post on all this, I'm getting my taxes, I'm getting my taxes, getting my taxes. I go get a car. They get that tax car, then 3 months later, that tax car gone. Next year, what do? They go back and get the tax car again. 3 months later, it's gone. Sooner or later, we got to make a change. All right? But let me take it a step further. We see the same thing in the church. We see Easter Sunday, everybody here. Well, let's see if we go back. New Year's. When New Year's comes, they make a resolution. I am going to be in church more. I'm going to be in the gym more. I'm going to do all of this. I'm going to show up the Bible study. I'm going to show up the Bible discovery. I'm going to do all of this. Then around February, they did the first 2 weeks, January, then right? Then they say, because Easter's coming around first, well, you know what? I went on in 2022, wasn't my year, but I realized I got to get back started. So Easter, they come. Then you don't see them again for Mother's Day. Both fathers, they don't have nobody in church for Father's Day. But they see them again on Mother's Day. All right. Then the next time you see them, if it's the AME Church, it's the pastor's anniversary or something like that. Or when we're doing some eating, they show up. All right? A revolving door and wonder why things are not going the way they want. Amen. But watch this, and this is what we need to really and truthfully pray for when we talk about leadership. When we talk about, and I'm not just talking about at the White House. I'm talking about all the way down to the mayor. I'm talking the sheriff, I'm talking about our local politicians. We need to pray that we have somebody that respects our religion, respects God, right? Because if they have a zeal and a fear of God, then they're going to try to do everything that falls in line in God's grace. And watch this. It says, because King Cyrus respected the religious belief of the Jews, and an indication that God has touched his heart and revealed God's divine purpose for the children of Israel. We need politicians. We need people. We need leaders that God has touched their heart. Right? That God has touched their heart. But watch this. We have to realize something too. And I am even fine. This is going to sound crazy. If it's a Pharaoh type leader. Because God touched Pharaoh's heart, he hardened it. All right? So I'm even fine if it's a Pharaoh type leader, because sooner or later I'm going to end up at my Red Sea and he's going to help me get through it. All right? While he is watching me get through it. But so even if it's somebody that is hard on me, even if it's somebody that is trying to get me, what it's doing is keeping me on my knees. It's keeping me prayed up. Because sometimes when things are going good, the last thing we do is pray. When our money ain't acting funny, the last thing we do is pray. When the car's running good, the last thing we do is pray. When we got a bunch of food in the refrigerator, the last thing we do is pray. When the pastor comes to the church and the church is full, the last thing he do is pray. It's when the numbers start dwindling. It's when the money start coming in. Oh, that's when we really. Right? So sometimes we got to have that person that keeps us on our knees. We got to have that enemy, because how can the Lord prepare a table in the presence of them if we don't have none? That's why you always hear me say, if you ain't got no haters, you ain't doing something right. If you ain't got no haters, you ain't doing something right. And you might need to take a look, because you might be the hater. If you ain't got none, you might be hating on somebody else. But we need people that has been touched in some shape, form, or fashion by God. But we got to make sure, because it all boils down to what? Us. So we have to make sure as we walk on this earth, as we go from day to day, as we go from place to place, as we come in contact with our neighbors on a daily basis, that we're trying to treat them the way we want to be treated. We're trying to love them the way that we want to be loved. And I'm not, you remember I used to say this, Sister Diane, I don't want everybody to love me the way they love themselves. Right? That ain't what it's about. I don't want everybody to pray for me like they pray for themselves. That ain't what it's about. Because now what I'm doing is I'm placing blame. I'm taking it off of me. Bible says, love thy neighbor as thyself. I can't say what somebody else do, but I know I love myself. I know I think highly of myself. I know I want to be respected. I know I want to be heard. I know I want to do everything I can possible to live the life that God has for me. So if I want that for myself, anytime I approach anybody else, I'm going to treat them with the same respect, because I'm looking at myself. And the last thing I want to hear is, when I was naked, you did not clothe me. When I was hungry, you did not feed me. When I was sick, you did not come see about me. Lord, when was you naked and I didn't clothe you? Lord, when were you sick and I didn't come see about you? When were you hungry and I didn't feed you? Because when you did it to the least of them, you did it to me also. And why is this tablet updated? Oh. You did it to the least of them. So I want to be in a spot to where I am always giving the love that I want in return. Because you remember it says, whatever you loosen on earth, you loosen in heaven. Right? Yeah. So what I want to do is I want to make sure that I'm loosening love, because I want to make sure when I get there and stand before Peter on the judgment that he showed me love in return. Right? So we got to realize we want people that are after God's own heart. But also, we want to make sure we are after God. Look at part of the book for why this update. That we're after on God's own heart. So when we look at this moving forward, and I can't remember where I stopped it because I had it on my tablet. Let me see there. Oh, this release from bondage can be compared in some ways to the release of the Israelites held captive in Egypt. The king commanded the treasurer Merodach to personally count the articles that Nebuchadnezzar stole from the temple and ensure they were returned. There was no force or coercion by plague, no test of wills. Instead, the pagan rulers recognized the value of the people of Israel and their beliefs. It is unclear from this text, but historical records indicate that King Cyrus did not attempt to assimilate other cultures into those of Persia. Instead, a practice of willingly offering the captives the ability to maintain their cultural beliefs could possibly promote unity and support of the Persian occupation. What can be observed is the readiness of the people to invest into the Israelites' return to Jerusalem and the rebuilding of their homeland. As a historical account unfolds, the completion of the Israelites' bondage is at hand. As the Israelites return to Judah, a brief census is taken in chapter 2. There is an apparent intentionality to detail not only the number of people returning, but their specific lineage, skills, and abilities. Ezra illustrates the number of priests and Levites who were present and accounted for. This indicates the importance of those responsible for restoring not only the physical building, but the revelation of the sanctity of worship. As the people return, Ezra presents a glorious celebration and creates a spirit of hope and the restoration of their people and reconciliation with their God. So as we see, anything that strikes out before I go into some of the things I wanted to point out. One of the things is this right here. If we notice, King Cyrus did not try to push his beliefs on them. He did not try to push anybody else's beliefs on them. He allowed them to be who they are. One of the biggest gripes people have is that Christians are always trying to push our beliefs on other people. All right? We're trying to preach people happy. We're trying to condemn people with the word. We're trying to do all of this, and sometimes we got to realize that just let people be. Just let people be. Because watch this. Sooner or later, they will come. But watch this. We got to realize this, that the Lord said, not everybody that believes in me right now is going to hell. Right? In other words, he said there are people that's not in this fourfold that will be with me. Right? And he also said this, not everybody that says, Lord, Lord, will enter the kingdom of heaven. Right? So what we have to do is going back to this. We got to love people in spite of. I went back and listened to some of the sermon that I preached, and I talked about the Jehovah's Witness. And when they knock on the door, I told them I was going to let them come in, right? We got to love them, right? And guess what? We had a group before we moved to where we were, a group of Latter-day Saints came to the house one day and knocked on the door, and I opened the door and they had the Bible there. And I didn't have time because I was getting ready to leave, so I said, yeah, let me hold the Bible. And I started looking at that and looking at some of our stuff. Then I got the Quran and started reading some of the Quran. I got some other literature and started reading it, because the thing is, when I know what other people are thinking, it helps me in my preaching. When I understand what others are going through and see it from their point of view, it helps me. And then it dawned on me, Sister McCabe, that's what you was trained to do in the military. You were trained to see the other side. Because if I could see the other side and get into their head and think the way they think, then guess what? I'm able to do what I need to do. See, sometimes we talk about all these other religions and how bad it is and why they don't believe in Christ and why this and why that. And we're not realizing that some of the stuff they're doing, we need to do. All right, watch this. Watch this. We talk about the Jehovah's Witnesses, right? We talk about the Latter-day Saints and all of that, riding the bicycles and knocking on people's doors. What is that called? It's called evangelizing. Right? It's called evangelizing. What should we be doing? What did Jesus tell his disciples? Go ye to all. Right? The problem is we ain't going. Other people are going. And they're finding. Right? Other people are going and they're finding. Right? I ride by a lot of the temples are and I can't remember what the Jehovah's Witnesses is called. They're they're halls. And guess what? Not only is it full, right? The parking lots are paved. The building looks good.
Amen.
Right? And guess who's out there doing the work? They are. But we see our churches falling apart, and we'll ride by and say, oh, they sure need to cut the grass while we pulling a trailer. They're going to cut somebody else's yard.
Amen.
Oh, the church surely need paint. When we got a bunch of paint sitting in our garage that we ain't touched in years.
Amen.
Right? So as we see, there comes a time to where we need to not try to force our religion on other people. We need to get better at our religion for us. And there's no doubt in my mind, the reason why we don't allow other people to come in our homes that's talking about other religions and all of that is because, for one, we don't know how to defend ours. All right? Right? But watch this. It is crazy. Let somebody be talking about your favorite team.
Mm-mm.
Let somebody be talking about your favorite team. Oh, you're going to jump right in the middle of that conversation and tell them why they should like your team. And be able to point out history and all of that. But we can't point out why we love Jesus. We can't point out. It's because Mama and them told me to. Mm-hmm. So we got to start allowing people to be people, and all we need to do is just plant seeds. As was said, we need to be careful of the words that we say. And sometimes we don't even need to preach the Bible to people to have a conversation. Right? I could sit there, Brother RJ, if I may use Brother RJ for an example. Brother RJ comes to me and says, Rael, I got some issues. I got some things that's going on. And I say, well, Brother RJ, you know, what are these issues? He tells me. Well, Brother RJ, if you just take it a step at a time, if you just believe that you can get through these issues, you can get through them. How can I believe? Well, you just got to have faith. You got to trust in yourself first, right? And in the back of my mind, I'm waiting on a opening for Brother RJ to say something. I can say, well, Brother RJ, for me, I've had these issues, and I had to not only trust in myself, I had to trust in the Lord. I ain't throwing the Bible verses at it. I didn't say the Bible says you need to trust in the Lord with it and lean not to your own understanding. Didn't say none of that. I'm just having a conversation with him, and guess what? If the Bible never comes up, if religion never comes up, it ain't that I didn't do my job as a preacher. No. I just planted a seed for him to come back and have another conversation. Because let me tell you, if we continue to talk and try to throw our religion on people, when they see us coming, guess what they're going to do? Go the other way. Because how many people, every time you see them, want something from you, and every time you see them coming, you do what? So if you don't want no friends, if you don't want people that always bother you, just try to beat them over the head with religion. And I guarantee you, they're going to stop coming around you. One of the other things that I wanted to point out now that my tablet has so graciously rebooted is this right here. It says right here, instead a practice of willing offering. The captives, the ability to maintain their cultural beliefs could possibly promote unity and support of the Persian occupancy. Guess what? All of us need to learn how to get along. Because what it does is it promotes unity. All of us need to learn how to get along. And what's crazy to me is this right here. When I look at other races, right? When I go into a Chinese restaurant, right? They have their family working there. When I look at the Mexican community, right? All of them are staying there amongst each other, having a good time, right? And they can sit there all day long. They can play soccer. They can do all of this. And let's not get it twisted. They're having some conveyors and they're having some spirits with them, right? But you hardly ever see the police ever coming. You hardly ever see it in fights because if they get too drunk, guess what? You ain't driving home. You're going to stay right here with me, right? We can't even get through the first course in a family reunion when somebody fight. The dominoes game ain't even got good yet and somebody fight. We ain't even got through the first hand at spades bid with and somebody fight. So we got to start getting along with each other before we even reach out for anybody else. Cyrus knew at this time, in order for everybody to come together, he needed to promote unity, right? The problem is, and I'm just talking about the church folk right now. I'm just talking about the church. Problem is, we're too busy competing with each other at church. And the churches are not coming together. We're too busy competing. This church is saying they're having friends and family day on third Sunday, and they put it out on their board. So the church down the road said, well, we need to have friends and family day on second Sunday. Or we're going to have friends and family day on third Sunday too, and try to pull these people. You have pastors, when they have conversations with people, with other members of other churches, well, you know that church ain't no good. You should come over here and we do more. No. We need to promote unity. We need to promote unity. I remember one thing that I saw that we hadn't been able to do that I would love to start back doing eventually is the Unity Day that McChapel used to have. And that Unity Day, if I'm understanding it, that we invited other churches that didn't look like us to come praise with us. Because that's what we need. We need other people that don't look like us to praise with us. But before we can even get to that, we need people to look like us to praise with us. Our biggest problem is we can't come together as people, so how can we expect others to help us out? Anything from anybody? Because I want to really touch on this Sankofa and case study. A couple things I wanted to point out. Anything from anyone? One thing I did want to point out, and I saw Brother McKay had this circle in his book. Ezra represents a glorious celebration and creates a spirit of hope and the restoration of their people and reconciliation with their God. Sometimes other people are not going to be excited about what you see. Some people are not going to be enthusiastic about growing the church. Some people are not going to be enthusiastic about the program that you're about to put on. But guess what? You still got to have the hope. You still got to be glorious in it. You still got to continue, because sooner or later, as we said, all it takes is a little spark to turn into a flame. Ezra was ready to celebrate. David was ready to dance. What are we ready to do? What are we ready to do? We can't allow people to destroy our hope. We can't allow people to silence our celebration. We can't allow people to dictate our praise. I want to get into something right here, and it's kind of funny. You know, I ain't gonna say it's funny. It amazes me how we were having the fire, the fires in Bay County. You don't have to go that way to work, please, Sister Laura.
231.
231. So is the smoking still on? Or you not that far?
I left Friday before it got bad.
Okay. It says right here, there is an African proverb that says, "He who burns down his house knows why ashes cost a fortune." If you ever have to spend money on something, and normally house repairs, car repairs, always seem like they cost the most. I got the truck back, and the repairs was $8,000 and some dollars. I went to before I went to pick up Jasmine on Friday. I went to get the oil change, and I had to get one of the bulbs changed. And the lady came back to me and said, "Well, Mr. Jordan, we could change the bulb." I said, "I know, yeah, I really want you to change the bulb." She said, "But the whole the whole thing needs to be, the enclosure and all that needs to be changed because there's water in it, and it'll keep going out." Okay, yeah, give me a quote. She came back and said, "Oh, that part is discontinued." I said, "For real?" She said, "Yeah, we can't find that no more." I said, "Huh, that's kind of funny, because I just got the truck repaired and they found the bulb, and you telling me you can't?" "Oh, that's what the computer's saying." I said, "Okay, no problem. You want us to order?" I said, "Not for no $700 and something, you know." Then she came and said, "Well, we can't change it because it'll go out." I need you to change it. If it goes out, guess what? It goes out. So it just amazes me when stuff breaks. The thing that breaks seems like it's the most expensive part on your truck in your house. You know, there ain't nothing that you know just goes out and take $10. Even the bulbs on the truck is $179. I'm like, I'm about to go get me a flashlight, Sister Laura, and some duct tape and put on there. But we got to realize that, yeah, some stuff costs a lot. And when we break it ourselves, that's when it really costs even more. All right? But watch this. It says right here, in that not so distant past, there was an alarming number of house fires that resulted from people smoking in bed. You know, when we look at the fires in Bay County right now, some people have lost their homes. And it wasn't because of anything that they did. It was because of somebody else's action. Somebody else, and it wasn't malicious that it happened. All they were trying to probably do is burn underbrush and start burning the trees down and all of that, and it got out of hand. Sometimes we got to realize some things that we do, we're not doing it maliciously. But when we see it start to get out of hand, we need to step in and do something right then. But the problem is we won't step in, and then it turns into something. We've had churches that have fallen apart not because of a malicious act, but just because of a conversation that got out of hand. And the pastor didn't want to step in, or a member didn't want to step in and say, hey, look, let's stop this right now. Look, as Sister Sims would always say, let's just agree to disagree. Let's just move on from this because I see right now it ain't going to be no outcome. The last couple of weeks at work, I've had to tell one of my workers and one of the other guys that always comes in to talk to him when they started talking about Russia and Ukraine. And they're talking about this and talking about that and trying to say, well, it's the Democrats that did this and all that. I stopped them and said, hey, look, unless you died for this country or took a bullet for this country, don't come in here talking about the war in Russia or Ukraine and who fault it is. Well, why you say that? You ain't died for this country. I said, but I got shot for it. And I'm still not qualified to talk about Russia and Ukraine. Don't do it. Because one of my other coworkers one of my other employees came to me and said, I'm tired of talking about it. And I'm going to say something. And I knew if he said something, I won't get popcorn. It just let him go down. So I knew I had to stop it, right, before it got out of hand. Some of us are in positions to stop stuff before it get out of hand, but we don't. We don't. And another thing I want to talk about, it has also required their ability to see hope in the rubble. When we looked at the case study, the Sankofa, it talked about how they were in bondage. Talk about the Babylonian captivity. But even in the midst of the captivity, they had to be able to see the reveal. A lot of the times when we have stuff going on in our lives, if the house is caught on fire, or let's do it this way. When Hurricane Michael came and destroyed some of our stuff, destroyed some of our yards, and even messed up some of the houses, we had to have that ability to look through it, to see how we wanted that house to look moving forward. We had to be able to look through the trees that were on the ground to see how we wanted our yard to look moving forward. Because when the people came to fix it, what was one of the first things they asked? What do you want us to do? Do you want this roof on? Do you want this? Do you want us to pull up that tree? Do you want us to pull up the stump? Do you want us to burn it? Do you want us to carry it away? And if you can't vision how you want it, it's not going to happen. Every last one of us in here has either went to a beautician or a shop to get our hair cut or get our hair did. And what's the first thing they ask you? How do you want it? All right? And if you just sitting there looking in your mirror, looking at the mess of your hair and all of that, and don't have a vision of what you want, what can they do? And don't mess around and tell them, well, just do it whatever you want. Okay. Then you get the hair. You get the hairdo or the haircut, and it ain't nothing that you want. And the first thing they say to you, well, you told me to do what I want. Right? So we got to have the ability to see through the situation. We got to have the ability to see through the problem. Last thing that I got to close out, this case study. If y'all don't have a chance, please read the case study. Y'all hadn't read it. Today we commonly use the phrase 40 acres and a mule. But few of us have read the order itself. 3 of its parts are relevant here. Section 1 bears repeating in full. The islands of Charleston, South, the abandoned rice fields along the rivers of 30 miles back from the sea, and the country bordering the St. Johns River, Florida, are reserved and set apart for the settlement of the Negroes. Now made free by the act of war and the proclamation of the President of the United States. That's 1. Section 2 of the federal order stated that this land would be set aside specifically for these new communities, and it would be governed entirely by Black people themselves. Then Section 3 specified the allocation of land. Each family shall have a plot of not more than 40 acres of tillable ground, and when it borders on some water channel, with not more than 800 feet of waterfront, and the possession of which land the military authorities will offer them protection until such time as they can protect themselves, or until Congress shall regulate their title. So when we look at that, how did that come? That 40 acres and a mule, it came as a joke. Right? When Abraham Lincoln was assassinated, his predecessor, Andrew Johnson, cut that out. What was supposed to be given to the Blacks was all the way from Charleston, South Carolina, all the way down to Jacksonville, Palatka, and all of the area along the St. Johns River. All right. So imagine if that would have came to fruition. Some of us probably wouldn't be in Malone and Jackson County, Gaston County, and all of that right now. That whole area. But watch this. It was to be governed by Blacks. It was to be protected by the Blacks. And now that I see what we are today in society, that's a scary thought. Because I'm just going to say it this way, and I hope some of them are watching. We got all Blacks on the commission in Gaston County. And I hope every last one of them get fired. Because they sit there and fuss and fight amongst each other, and nothing gets done. Nothing gets done. We have some board meetings now at McChapel that they go on, and no work get done because the Blacks want to fuss and fight amongst each other. And I can't understand for the life of me how we can have somebody that look like us in charge and won't do nothing they say, but have somebody that don't look like us and do everything they say. For the life of me, I can't understand that. For the life of me, I can't understand it. So this is what I got out of this right here. Because of God's wise providence and wisdom, He knew we wasn't ready then, and probably still not ready now for our 40 acres and a mule. But guess what He has done for us? He didn't give us a full 40, but He gave us a 0.5 acres on the cover. Right? He gave some of us more than that. And we still are not faithful over that. We're still not faithful over that. So if you want more, if you desire more, be faithful over the little you have, and the Lord will give you more. It's back in the hands of our superintendent.
Let's get it back in the hands. Okay, we're going to continue with we're going to do our offering the same way we've been doing, putting the envelope, church school, the level, and offering the same way. At this time, offering. All things come of thee, O Lord, and of thine own have we given thee. In announcement from the floor. Anyone want to tell you how much they enjoyed the word? If not, yeah.
No,
Ready for 2 minutes. I believe my AME Church School must grow and grow, and I must make it a top priority to make it so. Every member Christian, every Christian worker, every worker trained so that worker need not be ashamed. This we ask in Jesus' name. We have come, we have studied, we have learned. So let's come together to study God's word. May His rich blessing reside with you, and may His grace be eternally yours. Amen.
Good morning, everybody. can't have no little man. How's the little man? Oh, he coming?
All right.
All right, how you doing? You can be shared.
Yeah.